Welcome everyone to Monday Momentum. Actually, I wanted to make a quick announcement. We are going to be moving Monday Momentum to Mondays at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you've been following along with us, whether you're joining live or watching it later, and maybe that time wasn't convenient for you, we want to test at a different time. So we hope to see you next week, Monday Momentum, 5 p.m. Central Standard Time on Monday. So today, we're going to be talking about a tension that I think a lot of high achievers feel, but they barely talk about it aloud. And it's you start thinking, how do I get into the spotlight? But how do I also not lose credibility of who I am, what I stand for? Because if we're honest with ourselves, right, you didn't get to where you are. At least most people didn't get there because they were really loud. High achievers, or the people who really kind of got into the spotlight, they did it because they were competent, right? They knew what they were doing. They were prepared. They were excellent at what they were doing. They were good educators. They were thoughtful in what they put out to the world. And people saw value in that. And that's how they grew, right? But then how do you do that and not lose credibility? Because somewhere along the way, right, visibility, which we talk about a lot, which it starts to feel risky. So you worry, like, if I share too much, will I seem less serious? Will they take me less serious? If I simplify everything, right? Will people think I'm less intelligent because I'm trying to simplify it as my audience grows? Or like, even if I showed up publicly, will I lose respect? But then you think, well, I'm trying to reach the world. How do I do that? I have to show up publicly. So today I want to dismantle that fear, at least help you think about it. And please, put your thoughts in the comments or your questions, because I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who thinks this or feels this, but I don't think so. And I think maybe sometimes as high performers, right, we fear the thought of being visible. And it's because we're trained to let our results speak for us, right? How are we doing in this thing? How did that investment deal go? Like how much returns did our investors get? We want that to speak for itself, right? And so maybe before we were rewarded by quiet excellence, right? Or precision, because that's how we did the thing that we got us to fame, or humility. And sometimes even it's by staying in our lane. And so when we start thinking about the idea of, okay, visibility, how do I get to the world, it feels like you are self-promoting. And self-promotion feels very uncomfortable, and I can attest to that. But it feels like, like you're talking about yourself, you're putting yourself out there, and sometimes that doesn't isn't easy. But I would say this, right? This is a truth that I'm learning. It's a lot of high achievers, they don't fear being seen, but sometimes you fear being misinterpreted, right? Because the more you put yourself out there, the more eyes see who you are, what you're doing, what you're talking about. And so it's easy for people to misinterpret who you are, all of those things, right? So sometimes the fear is, will I be, like, will it come off as a performance, or will it come off as not as serious, not as rigorous, and then the idea of like being judged by people who don't understand whatever it is that you're teaching, selling, preaching, talking about, and so sometimes we hide, and the hiding doesn't really protect your credibility. Really, this is so important, right? Sometimes we're like, okay, let's stay in our lane and be quiet, and we think that we're going to protect, what we've worked so hard for, and our credibility. But all it does is just reduce your impact, because instead of speaking to 1,000 people, right, you end up only talking to 10 people. So imagine the impact that you could have made if you decided to become more visible. And this is something that, like, you should kind of just pause and think through as you're thinking about growth. And I want to clear something up that I think is very important, right? Credibility, that the idea of being credible is not diminished by becoming more visible. So, if more people know you, right, your message is watered down. I think that's a fear. And I don't think that that's true at all. I think that you start losing credibility when, maybe your words don't match your action, or you're not as transparent, or your message lacks substance, right? Whatever it is, or the product that you're selling, you know, when it doesn't speak for itself. I think that's when you start losing credibility. Your visibility should be louder than your values, right? And that's when that happens, like you start thinking, okay, maybe I am losing credibility, right? That's how you should be thinking about, instead of thinking, okay, I don't want to put myself out there because I'm going to be less credible. Look back at the things that you are doing that could have made you less credible. And so that's kind of what I want us to maybe pause on and, just take in a little bit is, if who you are, what you stand for, what you're showing to the world, if that's grounded in experience, right? So you know what you're talking about, you're educated. If it's grounded in truth and transparency, I think all of that, right? People see that. People want credibility, they want authenticity, they want transparency, they want truth, they want to know that there are values behind whatever it is that you're promoting, preaching, selling, teaching, all those things, right? If you do those things, your credibility is going to be amplified, your impact is going to be through the roof. And I think that that's the most important things, right? The most credible leaders, they're not the most quiet, right? But they're the clearest, right? You know what they stand for, you know their mission, you know their vision, you know the impact, you know what they want to do, everything is very clear. And I think that's more important, right? Sometimes they don't just talk for talking's sake, right? They communicate exactly what they want to do. They don't overshare, but they are really, they translate things that are hard into, again, clarity. So I think that that's very important when you think about, what does it mean as I start growing, right? As I start becoming bigger, how do I still hold on to what's important, but still be credible? And I think that there's a difference between like chasing spotlight and stepping onto the stage, right? The spotlights, when you think about, like, okay, spotlights, numbers, impressions, right? Views, virality, I think that's about attention. But I think when you think about, okay, what does it mean to take it to the next level, to step on stage, right? I think that comes with a level of responsibility. And I think that you have to understand the difference between both of them, right? One is saying, look at me, and the other is saying, let me serve you with what I know. Let me help, move the needle forward in your life, and whatever that looks like, right? And whatever it is that you're teaching, selling, preaching, promoting, whatever it is. So I would say, or like whatever value that you're giving, whatever service that you're teaching. I think that's the difference, right? And when you don't show up to be admired, right, and you continue to contribute, that also makes a really big difference, because then your credibility is preserved. So that's kind of some of the things that, as you think about stepping into, as you start thinking, what does it mean to become more credible, to become more visible? How do I retain what I know? Like, how do I retain the value, what's important to me? I would say, when you think about it from that aspect, there are three things I think you should really hold on to. And I think the first one is to anchor your visibility to your experience, right? So that's, I would say, speak when you start telling stories, right? I want you to speak from what you've lived, what you've learned, what you've built, what you've taught. I think all of that is important, because then people, when you teach from learned experiences, people are more likely to relate to it and to learn from it, because those lived experiences are credible, right? I can say, I used to be a passive investor, and I used to invest, and I saw return on my investment. And so I wanted others to come alongside and grow wealth as well, right? So that was a lived experience, and that builds credibility, and it defeats all the noise. So I think you could ask yourself, like, what do I know well because I've done it, right? As you start thinking about reaching and impacting the people in your atmosphere, or what lessons cost me time, money, and growth, and how can I teach others that thing? So I think that from experiences, you allow that your visibility to come from your lived experiences. I think that's very important. And I think that, and the people who do this well stands out when you teach and not perform. So a lot of the time, right, when you come from an education standpoint, people are more likely to trust that, to believe that, that that's more credible, right? So you don't need maybe like buzzwords or like hot takes. Those things are sometimes important, right? But they're not the core of what you are putting out. What you're putting out needs to be very clear. It needs to be contextual. It needs to have insight into whatever it is that you're teaching, you're educating, whatever it is that that you are selling, whatever it is that you stand on or you stand for, right? Those are the things that it needs to be about, and not the other things. And I would say that the goal, when you come from a place of teaching and not performing, right? The goal is not to sound smart. The goal is actually to make others smart. I think that's very important, that, people become better because of what you're doing for them, because of the values that you're instilling, because of, the education that you're giving, whatever it is, because of the service that you're giving them, right? They become smarter because of that. And then I would say the last one, I would say this, and I talk about this a lot, um, within Phoenix, within my expansive life, is that let your consistency do the work for you. Let that consistency help you build trust, right? So credibility, which is so important, is not built on one person, one moment, one viral post, one large impression, one thing, right? It's built over time. And that time span is consistency, right? So consistency might say, like, I'm not chasing attention. I want to contribute, right? So when you think about it as you do the work and the work speaks for you over time, I think that what will happen is that people will easily trust you. They'll easily follow you. They'll easily buy from you. They'll join your course. They'll get educated by you. They'll, whatever it is that you're doing, when you are consistent over time, when you let your authority speak, when you teach, and when you're consistent. I think if you can do those three things, right, as you build credibility, as you start stepping on stage, as you start growing, I think if you come from those places, right, then you're likely to not see yourself as, I'm just doing this to become louder. I'm not just doing this to become more viral, but I really do want to be visible for the right reasons, so that my impact can be bigger, my impact can be larger. I can really think about touching the world as high performers, as you think about growing. So I would say, this week, as you think about, what does this even mean? Like, how do I become visible correctly, right? I would say, I'm always about practicality, and I'm also about easy and small. Sometimes when we take on really big challenges, there's a high likelihood that we will fail. But if you start small and you get proof of concept, and you one person sees what you're doing, you get to impact one person, that is more likely to grow. Consistency, snowball, reps, all the things that we talk about on Monday Momentum. But I would say, so back to what I would like you to kind of think about this week, I want you to think about maybe sharing one insight, that is rooted in an experience. So whether you're great at marketing and you teach someone what that means, or whether you are wonderful at encouraging people and you help people grow, or you teach about something that you're really good at, something that you're passionate about, something that you want to grow in, right? Teach from a lived experience, one insight, something that you've learned that you can say, I did this and the result was this. Teach from that place and see what comes out of it. And then along those lines, right, let it be something that so something that you're good at, something that is clear, that you can speak about, that you don't have to fluff, you don't have to add fluff. It doesn't have to be anything, again, anything large. It could just be something small, and you teach from there. And I would say the third thing, which is simple, is just show up to serve. And don't, this is hard, but don't worry about the numbers. With time, right? If you are consistent, if you come from a place of value, um, provision, if you come from a place where you're just like, I really truly I have something to share and I want to impact the world, right? Over time, not performance, not perfection, just coming from a place of being present and being consistent, I guarantee you that you will grow. And I guarantee you that that impact and that credibility and that visibility that you are shooting towards, like, it will happen. It might just take a little bit longer than you think, you hope, you want, but again, right? Nothing good is easy. You have to put in the work. So As I'll leave you with this final thought. I think this was maybe a little bit deeper than we envisioned, but I also think as as we start growing, right? As we think about living expansive lives, as we think about making an impact, this topics like this are important because it's inevitable that you're going to grow. And so when you understand that that growth needs to come from the value, it needs to come from a place of authenticity, transparency, trust, consistency. And then I think you understand that it's important to have these conversations. But I would say, as kind of we wrap up, right? Credibility isn't lost when you step into the spotlight, right? You have to grow. You do have to get into the spotlight to be able to really reach the masses. I think that credibility is actually lost when we are silent, especially when we have something to say and something impactful. We lose credibility when we're silent and we allow someone else to step into the spotlight and maybe mislead people, right? That looks different, but for different things, for different areas, for different zones of expertise. But when you are quiet, right, you lose credibility. And so it is okay to want to grow and step into the spotlight, but for the right reasons. And so you don't, I'd say, kind of as I think about maybe something to leave us with for the week, and as you think about growth and figuring out how you can, impact, right? You don't become someone else to be seen, right? You don't have to be like your coworker or your best friend or your family member or that or your mentor, right? You just need to do more of what you're already doing. Consistency. You just need to keep doing that, and I think that that will speak for itself. So when you step into the spotlight, I want you to come from a place of depth, which has to do with knowledge, come from a place of integrity. You need to be transparent in your mission, your vision, your core values, how you lead, what's important to who you are, to what you're building. You have to step into the spotlight with those things. And I would say, I think the most important thing above all is to bring who you are, bring your voice, because people lean on the people that they trust, that they want to do life with, that they really believe in your mission, your vision, your core values, and your voice and what you stand for. So step into those things because I do think that those things are really important. Um, and I will say that, and I've learned, and this is something that I want others to kind of learn, is that leadership is not about being the loudest. You do not have to be the loudest in the room, but you do have to be the most trusted. And whether that is like trusted voice, trusted partner, trusted vision, whatever it is, but you have to be the most trusted one so that people can actually believe in what you do. And in your leadership. So as we think about, as we think about really the topic that we talked about today, which is really stepping into the spotlight without losing credibility, I would say maybe you just pause and think, what does that mean? How do I become the trusted voice? How do I become the person that people can lean on, the person that people can lead with? So I'll stop there. If anybody has any questions, please put it in the chat, or any thoughts or comments. I'd love to hear them. When you're quiet, you lose credibility. I truly believe that. Sometimes it's easy for us to kind of hide, but I think people are actually losing and not winning. Okay. Trust, transparency, value, consistency. Agreed. 100% agree with all of those. So, yes. Thanks everyone for showing up today, and for engaging. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.